Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It's time for the 10th episode of this season's Lions Grit. As always, we are your hosts. I'm Kevin Marheine, joined by Mr. Joseph Wilmot. And today, for episode 10, we will be taking a look at the preseason matchup between the Houston Texans, who will be hosting our Detroit Lions. This is game two, Joe. We recently talked about game one against the Patriots. It was ugly. This is week two. New week, new chances for the Lions. As we talked about in our last video, didn't leave that game with much positives. Not a great feeling. Not a great way to start the preseason. All that being considered, it's a new week, a new chance for the Lions. My question to you, Joe, is what do you think let me back up. What can the Lions do to make you feel better here in week two? Because obviously, week one, like we talked about, a disaster. How can they start to make amends? What are you going to be looking for here in this game against the Texans? That's to find that silver lining, to find some hope, some optimism after what was a very bad way to start out the season.
Well, what you can do is you can eliminate a few people on the offensive line that didn't block any. Then what you can do is you can incorporate TJ Hawkinson into the offense, where he wasn't incorporated in the first preseason game. He made no appearance whatsoever. He's got all this hype around him. Didn't have an appearance. It's like, what? So next up, we have improvements on the defense. Improvements on the defense would be good, like closer man coverage. Darius Slay played, but I mean, he gave up a lot of big plays to the wide receivers. Is he going to be able to clamp down, or is he just aged or whatever? So you're going to have to look at areas of improvements. You want to see areas in the offensive line. You want to see areas of the secondary. You want to see areas of special teams. Those are three areas that need to be corrected. Mm-hmm. Corners, all offensive line. And if you can do that, then all of a sudden you have a good chance to get some more evaluation for some players, such as running backs, quarterbacks. On defense, you can see how fast a defensive lineman gets to the quarterback. You can see your linebackers reading the run, the play action, and your safeties have a chance to get in position, and you can measure or not whether or not they're out of position or in position.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on some things for me too that I'm going to be looking at. One of the big concerns from that first game for me was the play of the offensive line. Obviously, they got to those Tom Savage and David Fales quite regularly. We're putting a lot of pressure on them, and you touched on a very good point that limits your ability to evaluate, the guys at the skill positions. If the O-line can't give the play time to develop and for them to execute what they need to do, then it makes it hard to judge the other guys. Receivers, can't catch a ball if the quarterback's getting sacked and it's not getting thrown to them. So it's going to be, I think, for me, the big thing that I want to see in this game is hopefully some improved offensive line play. Of course, I'm a little biased. I also used to be an offensive lineman, so there's that wrinkle. But, really, I think that was one of the glaring things that stood out to me against the Patriots was just how poorly the offensive line played. So here against the Texans, the good news is they're not going to see, hopefully, a whole lot of J.J. Watt. I know they've seen a lot of him in practice. But, hopefully they're not going to be seeing a lot of the Texans' top guys. So it should give them a chance to, be playing against the other second stringers and third stringers. And I just want to see improvement out of them because last game, it was bad. We sort of talked about it in the video, but overall the Lions seemed flat. So I'm hoping, sort of the offensive line can be that maybe help energize the team and come out there and show they want it because they did a poor job of keeping the quarterbacks upright in the last game. So I'm hoping for some improvement there. Yeah, and as we talked about in one of our previous videos, there's a lot of position battles out there this preseason, and one of the ones that this will be our first week post the Jermaine, or our first game post the Jermaine Kearse broken leg injury. So one of the positions we highlighted in that positions battle video was the wide receiver position, right? We were talking about how our top three receivers are pretty solidified in Jones Jr., Galladay, and Amendola. But beyond that, it's sort of it was thought to be Jermaine Kearse because he had that big signing bonus and he's worked with Darrell Bevell in the past, but he broke his leg in that first game. So that means here this week against the Texans, we're going to get our first real looks at some of the guys who are going to be counted on because, obviously a lot of our production is going to come from those top three receivers. But beyond that, like your fourth string receivers is still, there's plenty of four wide sets that happen in today's NFL. They go five wide a lot. Obviously the fifth person could be TJ Hawkinson or it could be Jesse James. Both of them are decent pass catching and route running tight ends. But you're still going to need a fourth wide receiver. So I know the word out of the practices down there in Houston has been that Chris Lacey seems to be like the most likely candidate to step in and be that fourth receiver, with Travis Fulgham seeing like, of course, being a rookie we drafted in this past draft, has a chance to be that fifth receiver. Joe, what are you looking for out of these receivers? Obviously, like I mentioned, a big part, the quarterbacks are going to need to be able to get them the ball, but are you excited to see what these young guys are going to do, just because we're going to need to count on it, at least one of them here in the season?
Yeah, the best guys for the season are going to be the ones trying to make the team.
Mm-hmm.
You look at some people who are already established, they don't have anything to gain or lose other than just playing an average season. You look at players playing for a roster spot for money and playing with passion to earn a wage. These are the guys that are going to contribute more to your team. That's the biggest problem we have with Stafford, is the guys earn more money than most quarterbacks in the NFL have ever have, and he just goes out there and goes through the motion. He's got no want to win, succeed. He just puts up the numbers and calls it a day. You look at these wide receivers, like Brandon Powell, like other ones, Ellington, if he's on the team, I don't know. And you look at, Jones, you look at Amendola, you look at Galladay. Galladay's playing for a contract. He's trying to get more money. He's going to have a good season. He's a young wide receiver you got to keep your eye on this year because he's playing for some pay. And, you got the young core playing for a roster spot to increase their pay. The more want and drive and desire somebody has to increase their bread and their butter, the more they're going to be able to contribute and put forth a good effort. That's why I say get rid of Stafford. You got to trade him. He's locking up 28% of your cap space. You got to trade him and get some people that are going to actually produce better than somebody who's got it made.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we commented on in the last video was the backup QB position. And so, I can't necessarily say I'm in the same boat where I say get rid of Stafford, but I have been a longtime proponent of getting an actually qualified backup QB, someone that could push Stafford, because, I think you definitely are right in some aspects with the fact that there hasn't been anyone pushing Stafford. There's no one behind him that's challenging him to, just like we're talking about with these guys competing for the roster spots, they're out there battling because they're fighting for their spot on the depth chart. and to make the roster, there's no one behind Stafford pushing him to be better. He is the franchise QB, and there is no challenge to him. We currently don't have an heir apparent on the roster either, so there's no one on the roster today who's going to be our starting QB post Matthew Stafford. So, these last few drafts, I've definitely thought it wouldn't be the worst idea to take a QB. Maybe, you don't have to go early in the rounds, but taking someone who could develop into that NFL starting quarterback in the later rounds, just to keep it in Stafford's mind that, hey, we have this guy on the roster, we're evaluating your play, sort of putting him on notice, because it's about accountability. He's been the highest paid QB in the NFL during his career. Part of that is, out of his control. He can't really control how, he was the last QB to be the first round pick to get the big contract. And then it's just worked out where when he's come up for contract renewals, the QB market's been what it's been. So I don't necessarily blame him for the amount of money that he's earned, but I guess when I say earned, he hasn't necessarily come out and shown that he's been worth that investment either. Obviously, the Lions haven't done much in the playoffs with him during his tenure. So there's a lot of room there, and unfortunately, I know they were giving Stafford some rest days here during this week of practice. I'm not sure if we're going to see him on the field at all in this game against the Texans. If we do, we'll probably see him for maybe a series before they pull him out or something. Maybe like what the Browns did last week with Baker Mayfield. Of course, Baker Mayfield's a much younger quarterback than Matt Stafford, so maybe we'll see him for a series. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play at all. But yeah, I think unfortunately here in this game against the Texans, we're not going to get to see much of Stafford, and so just like last week, I think it's.
I just want to see good football. I'm tired of seeing this go through the motions stuff. I haven't watched a good football game in years. It's so unbelievably slow, popularized with commercials. It literally has no entertainment value. You just watch it like a programmed zombie, and there's nothing to enjoy about it other than to say, oh yeah, I'm a Lions fan, oh yeah, I like watching football, and being a jock or whatever. But it just, there's no people that are playing the game anymore.
Yeah, it would be nice to see some fire out of the Lions. As I mentioned, they seemed real flat last week. So I just want to see them energized and excited to be there and have, be playing football. It's a great game. It definitely makes it more entertaining when the team is coming out energized. So yeah, there's definitely some work to be done there. And of course, with it being a preseason game, obviously, you look at our opponents for this week, the Houston Texans. Texans have a lot of really talented guys that I would enjoy seeing. It's a preseason game, though, so unfortunately, preseason games aren't the most enjoyable games to watch anyways, just because you're not going to see a whole lot of J.J. Watt, of Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins. Even though I know I've seen it in preseason, some of the from on their Twitter, from some of the battles in practice between Darius Slay and DeAndre Hopkins, and that looked great. I just don't think we're going to see very many plays in this preseason game with those two going head to head. We might get treated to a couple, but before the end of the game, it's going to give way to the second and third string guys. So preseason games are always a little difficult to watch in that fact. I think you really have to be someone that very much enjoys football, and very much is interested in checking out the depth that your team has, because you're not going to see really, really great things. So it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I wish we would see more of J.J. Watt and DeAndre Hopkins, Deshaun Watson, like the top tier guys. But with, again, a preseason game, we're not going to get treated to the A-list talent. They might be on the field But really, week 3, as we've mentioned in the other videos, is that week that typically teams use as their dress rehearsal. So for us, I believe that's the Buffalo Bills that we'll get to see the most of the starters play for us. I do know news yesterday was Snacks Harrison coming back to the team, so he's been activated off the non-football injury list. So it looks like, I know he's obviously wanting a new contract there, but he's rejoining the Lions. And I doubt we're going to see him in this game since he just came back yesterday.
Play out the course of your contract. I'm tired of all these people wanting new contracts before the length of their contract is up. You'll get paid your money if you play your contract. That's what I have to say. If you don't play your contract out, you're not going to get what you want. Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, and Snacks, Slay, all these players, and then they give NBA players an option, a player option. That's the most bullshit thing I've ever heard. An option. Opt out of your 5th-year contract. Doesn't make any sense. But play out the course of your contract and you'll get your money after you perform. It's going to help build you into who you are. If Dak Prescott plays this year for $4 million, like he's under contract to do so, yeah, he might get 30, 35, or maybe even $32 million. He ain't worth 40, but if he plays for $4 million and he has a superstar year and wins MVP, then yeah, maybe you'll want to pay him $35 million. But if he doesn't, then you're thinking to yourself, I got this guy on contract for 5 years earning $35 million, and what has he done? Why am I paying this much money for no good talent?
It's going to be interesting to see what happens because I know the current CBA, the collective bargaining agreement there, I think we're almost to the end of that. So I know it's in a couple of seasons, or I think it's a couple of years here. That's going to need to be renegotiated. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there because obviously, you look around the league and there are plenty of players who are having these conversations about their contracts. So, from the player's point of view, I think at the moment you're absolutely right, Joe. I think, you signed the contract, play it out. It is what it is. If a team, I don't have a problem if the team is receptive to wanting to renegotiate the contract. But I think you have to be engaged. I think there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. I think if you're engaged with the team, and you let the conversation sort of play out behind the scenes, in the places they're supposed to, it's fine. But when you come out and you have unnamed sources leaking things to ESPN and things like that about how much money you want and how unfair everything, like I think that's the wrong way to go about it. But yeah, I think this, obviously, I hope my main concern with the CBA negotiations is going to be that hopefully the NFL has learned from the NHL's mistake, and that there is no lockout because, the NHL was really surging there, before they had their lockout. And now, we're just starting to get, the NHL is just starting to get back to where they were previously with games being, on national TV during primetime hours and things like that. So, I think the NFL definitely thinks very highly of themselves. But, as they've sort of found out here in recent years, yes, they still obviously make a ton of money. And with the CBA expiring in 2020, as pointed out, they may think that, hey, we're a big enough thing where we can weather the storm of having a lockout for a year so we can get the CBA the way we want it. I don't think doing a lockout is going to do them much good because, there are plenty of other things to do besides watch NFL football. So yes, NFL is very popular. I enjoy watching it very much, But, there are other things I can be doing. Often there's other things I'm doing while watching the NFL games. So I think right now, the NFL's
I
competition.
can't get off my phone. I can't lay down on the couch, put on the game without scrolling through my phone brainlessly, as that's more entertaining than what's on TV.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are plenty. The NFL I think thinks oftentimes they're competing against Major League Baseball or the NHL. You're not just competing with other sports leagues anymore for people's attention. Netflix has all their stuff. Hulu. There's plenty of stuff out there where if you want to enjoy some time and relax. You have plenty of options for your leisure time. So I hope the NFL's learned from the NHL's example and they don't decide to do a lockout with the CBA. Clearly, there are some hard feelings on the player side regarding contracts. So it's going to be interesting storyline to keep your eye on there, especially, again, the CBA expiring in 2020. As pointed out there that the XFL should also be back up and running at that point in time. So there's even, obviously there'll be college football even if there's a lockout. But, if the XFL can stick around, which may be tough because that other football league that started recently folded pretty quickly. Of course, the XFL may be a little more successful, but there may be other options for professional football too at that time. So I think the NFL needs to tread carefully. And as we mentioned, Snacks coming back, Slay. There's players on the Lions that are unhappy with their rosters. You mentioned the Cowboys situation. There's plenty of examples around the league where this is going to be a big thing, and decent storylines here in the preseason surrounding contracts. So when it comes time to negotiate that CBA, that's where a lot of the rules are. That's where the rules for these contracts are going to be established. So definitely something to keep our eyes on as we get closer to that 2020 expiration date. I think it's pretty easy video today, pretty short. Should be a good game between the Texans and the Lions. Hopefully, anyways, looking definitely a big chance for the Lions to show improvement because they set the bar really, really low in week 1. So shouldn't be too hard to make us, or to at least put forth a better effort. I'm hoping they come out energized and maybe, help us find a little bit of optimism here before we get the season started, because week 1 rough, week 2 we'll have to see. Definitely don't feel great headed into it.
One thing to watch is the free safety battle. You have to watch who's going to be your free safety. The replacement of Glover Quinn, who's going to take over that spot. You got Quandre Diggs, strong safety. He's a little bit undersized, but he's got speed and he can hit hard. So that's good for strong safety. But in order to solidify secondary, it's not only having one standout corner and having 2 average corners who can make plays periodically. It's having a free safety who can give you a good backup without blowing a coverage.
Yeah, it definitely takes. You can't just have like your one shutdown guy. You need It takes a village back there to have a successful secondary. So certainly something to keep an eye on here, and hopefully the Texans will give us a good challenge. Obviously, when DeAndre Hopkins is out there, that's a pretty big challenge. Obviously, one of the few guys to be ranked 99 in this year's Madden, as we talked about with the Madden rankings. So
he's not that good. He's an average player. He's not a 99.
He's certainly one of the best receivers in the game right now. That doesn't mean all time, but right now. So yeah, it's
never seen him play. Never seen him catch a football.
He unfortunately has suffered from the opposite of, I guess, if you look at Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson. Stafford was able to throw to Johnson, and it was great. I think it helped elevate him and, of course, his stats. Hopkins, unfortunately, has had some terrible QBs. Now with Deshaun Watson, it's a little better, but before Deshaun Watson, the Texans have been struggling for QBs. So, in an ideal world, if we could have somehow found a way to bring DeAndre Hopkins over here when we still had Megatron, now that could have been one heck of an offense there with Stafford would probably
been disputed. It'd have been a fight. It'd have been a mess.
Wow, the way Stafford used to throw the way they used to have Stafford throw the ball around, I think there could have been plenty for both. So, and at that point, with two really good receivers, maybe Stafford looks like a straw man Hall of Fame candidate, but only if they get some playoff wins. But who knows?
Johnson wants his money back. He's got to suit up and play another 4 seasons.
You know, Marvel is coming out on that Disney streaming service that's coming out, that What If series that's going to look at what if these certain things happened inside of the Marvel universe. It would almost be interesting if there was some way to do a What Ifs NFL series where you could, if you took players and just see if DeAndre Hopkins did end up on the Lions with Megatron, what would have happened for the Lions? It'd be, I always like those what if situations. It'd be
I hate the what if situations. What if this? What if that? It's endless. You can go on and on and on with what ifs. There's only official truth and competition.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think part of the reason that some people like the what ifs is that it helps you escape the actual reality. So I think for a lot of Lions fans, what ifs might be appealing just because it's well, what if we didn't have this, the results we've had over the last few seasons.
They live in fantasy land if they want to just think about all these what if scenarios. I mean, you could very well sit there and think what if everything. And it couldn't mean anything in terms of the reality of the situation. You got to put stuff in context. What's truth, what's false. It's true, that you have things going on that are visually supported by evidence. Complexity supported by evidence. If things aren't supported by evidence, they are false.
That is true. And I think tying that into this preseason game, we need some evidence that the Detroit Lions aren't going to have a terrible season, because right now, as we mentioned in the last video, a lot of the national broadcast, ESPN, Fox, the odds in Vegas all have the Lions not being very good. We need evidence to the contrary, because right now, we've tried. I think in the first episodes of the season, we've been optimistic. We've liked the Lions' chances. We need evidence of it, because we didn't get any in week 1. So here in week 2 against the Texans, that's what we're going to look for, is some evidence that the Lions that they have something going there. And of course, it's a little difficult because we'll be looking primarily at the backups. But hey, the Patriots' backups played fantastic. So if we're trying to get to that level of play, I expect to see our backups be able to be, doing similar things. So going to need some evidence of that here in week 2. Well, that will do it for us today. If you enjoyed the show, please do help the channel grow. Hit that like button, the subscribe button. We've been doing really good, building up some subscribers, and we really do appreciate it. It helps out tremendously. Our first goal here is to hit that 100 subscriber mark so we can get the custom URL for our YouTube channel. So, thank you to everyone who has subscribed. And again, for your consideration, if you did like what you've seen here today, please do go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Your support is tremendously appreciated. Yep. That will do it for today's episode. We'll be back with you on Tuesday to do our sort of reaction video. Unfortunately, I'll be in Traverse City this weekend not unfortunately. I'll be in Traverse City this weekend for a wedding, so I won't be available to do the recap closer to the actual game, which is on Saturday at 8 p.m. is when your Texans will be taking on the Lions. So we'll be back Tuesday to do the recap video there, and hopefully, Joe, we'll have some evidence of the Lions not being as awful as they looked in week 1.
I'm going to go off evidence for the rest of my life. If there's no evidence of anything, then there's no proof of anything. It ties into logic and the common sense of the complexity of the human condition.
Indeed. So we'll have to see. Hopefully, they'll give us some evidence, and we'll have a something good to talk about here for that recap video. But that's all. It's on them. They got to play the game and provide us that evidence. So, thanks again for tuning in. This has been the Lions Grid, our 10th episode, and we will catch you for episode 11 on next Tuesday. See ya.